Not all lies come from the mouth. Some lies are hidden in questions. They don't shout. They're subtle, gentle, but poisonous. They're not looking for answers. They're testing your emotional boundaries. In a world where truth is often distorted by emotion, the wise don't just listen to words. They observe how words are used. Marcus Aurelius once said, "He who understands the intention behind words is no longer easily led." So in this video, we will expose 7 of the most common manipulative questions liars use, not to make you afraid, but to keep you sharp. Not to start arguments, but to protect your reason. You may not be able to stop others from lying, but you can absolutely protect the truth within yourself. 1. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? 300 words. This isn't a real question. It's a subtle attack, shifting the focus from their behavior to your reaction. They broke your trust, you responded, and now you're being labeled as too sensitive, dramatic, or overreacting. The goal? To make you doubt yourself, so they don't have to take responsibility. But a Stoic doesn't react emotionally. We don't need to raise our voice to prove the truth. We just calmly return the focus to the core, behavior, not emotion. A calm, firm response. This isn't about feelings, it's about actions. Can you take responsibility or not? Not because we love confrontation, but because we don't allow ourselves to be derailed by manipulation. 2. Don't you trust me? 300 words. This might sound harmless, but it's a guilt-tripping trap. You notice something off, they don't explain. They don't clarify. Instead, they flip it back on you. Now you're the problem. Not because of what they did, but because you dared to question it. This is emotional blackmail disguised as affection. Stoicism teaches, those who are trustworthy don't need to ask for trust, they show it through their actions. So when someone asks, "Don't you trust me?" you don't need to argue, just observe. Their behavior speaks louder than words ever could. 1. They crave depth, not noise. Intelligent people, especially those who walk the Stoic path, are rarely drawn to casual small talk. They don't care who's wearing what, who's trending online, or who said what behind someone's back. To them, that kind of chatter feels like chewing on gum that's already lost its flavor. Tasteless and meaningless. What they seek is depth. They long for conversations that awaken thought. Questions about human nature, ethics, emotion, purpose. These are the kinds of dialogues that make them feel truly alive. They don't talk just to talk. They speak to connect. Not with empty words, but through mutual understanding. Not to fill silence, but to explore truth. Epictetus once taught, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." To someone who thinks deeply, words carry weight. They're not used to avoid awkwardness. They're used to express something that matters. And so, when they find themselves in loud, shallow conversations, they quietly pull away. Not out of arrogance, but because they understand the value of their attention and their energy. They choose to protect it for something more worthy. To them, a moment of thoughtful silence is more powerful than 1,000 empty sentences. And one real conversation, one where 2 minds meet with honesty and purpose, can mean more than a lifetime of polite small talk. They're not trying to be cold, they're trying to be true. And in a world addicted to noise, they've learned that wisdom often whispers in quiet rooms. 2. They protect their time like sacred wealth. Intelligent people see time differently than most. To them, time isn't just something to measure, it's something to honor. Not a space to kill or fill, but a living currency, the most sacred asset we'll ever own. Once spent, it can never be earned back. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And in today's world, distractions come dressed as obligations. Pointless meetings, superficial conversations, social invitations they feel guilty to decline, but exhausted when they accept. All of it slowly drains their spirit. But wise minds don't fall into that trap so easily. They've learned the art of saying no, calmly, but firmly. They don't show up just to be seen. They don't socialize just to keep connections. Because they know every moment given to the meaningless is a moment stolen from what truly matters. They'd rather spend one quiet evening reading than a whole day chasing empty conversations. They'd rather sit in stillness with their thoughts than stand in a room full of noise and feel utterly alone. For them, every tick of the clock is sacred, and they live as if they know their hours are numbered, because they are. So if they withdraw, it's not rudeness, it's not arrogance, it's wisdom, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what they're living for. In a world that glorifies being busy, they choose to be intentional, and that is a powerful rebellion. 3. They observe more than they speak. In a room full of voices, the intelligent, the Stoic, is often the quietest one. But don't mistake their silence for absence. They're not quiet because they have nothing to say. They're quiet because they're seeing more. They observe where the eyes go and where they avoid. They listen to the voice, not just the words, but what's hidden behind them. They feel the energy in the room when someone is being real and when they're wearing a mask. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion." And the wise understand this deeply. Not every question needs an answer. Not every conversation deserves participation. To them, listening is an act of intelligence. They don't argue to prove a point. They don't speak just to be heard. They seek to understand fully before they ever respond. And if no response is needed, they are at peace with staying silent. Their silence is not weakness, it is discipline. It is strength that does not need applause to exist. In today's world, where noise is mistaken for importance, where talking fast is mistaken for thinking fast, the Stoic mind moves in the opposite direction, because they know the most profound insight often comes from the one who listens the longest. And in the quiet corners of the mind, where words give way to stillness, that's where true wisdom begins. 4. They treat inner peace as sacred ground. There is a kind of peace that doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from applause. It doesn't come from praise or recognition. It comes from within, a quiet stillness that no one can touch but you. For the intelligent who walk the Stoic path, that inner peace is sacred, and they are willing to give up anything, even social acceptance, to protect it. They are not afraid of crowds. They are afraid of losing themselves in them. They fear trading their inner calm for a mask that pleases others but betrays themselves. A room filled with forced laughter, subtle competition, and shallow charm feels like spiritual noise to them. It disconnects them from who they truly are. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." The wise understand. They don't need to be understood by everyone. They just need to be at peace with themselves. So when they step away from the chaos, it's not because they're cold or aloof. It's because they know nothing deep grows in noise. They are not escaping the world. They are simply refusing to let the world disturb their foundation. To them, maintaining peace is the truest act of self-respect. 5. They are not addicted to validation. We live in a world built on likes, where approval is currency and attention is a drug. But intelligent people, especially Stoics, follow a different compass. They don't need others to tell them who they are, and they don't let public opinion shape their path. Marcus Aurelius once asked, "The approval of such men, who do not even stand well in their own eyes, how can it be worth seeking?" The intelligent do not seek to be impressive, they seek to be authentic, which is why social games, who's popular, who's admired, who's trending, mean nothing to them. They know the greatest freedom is not needing validation to feel whole. When they don't act to be praised, they act because it is the right thing to do. And that is enough. No spotlight, no applause, just a quiet, unwavering presence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. And that lack of need, that independence, makes them unshakable. They're not against recognition. They just refuse to sell their soul to earn it. Because those who truly know their worth don't need the world to remind them of it. Six, they find wholeness in solitude. Some people fear being alone, but the intelligent, they embrace solitude like a lifelong friend. To them, solitude isn't emptiness, it's a sacred stillness. Not a lack of company, but a fullness that doesn't need to be proven. They don't need parties to feel alive, they don't need crowds to feel real. They live entirely within, in a world where they can simply be without performing. In solitude, they hear their truest thoughts. They read to speak with the minds of centuries past. They write to have a conversation with their own soul. They walk in silence, as if every step brings them closer to who they really are. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." For them, an empty room can be the most peaceful place on earth. Because in that space, there is no judgment, no demand, no noise trying to pull them away from their essence. Solitude becomes a sacred soil where creativity, clarity, and calm are allowed to grow. In a world that never stops talking, they choose to listen. In a society that's always connected, they first reconnect with themselves, and from that place of quiet strength, they rise deeper, wiser, and more complete. 7. They fear losing themselves in the crowd more than being alone. What they fear the most is not a night spent alone, not the silence of unanswered texts, not the absence of invitations. What they fear is becoming someone they're not, just to be accepted. The intelligent understand a harsh truth. The cost of fitting in is often the death of authenticity. They refuse to live a life designed by others' expectations only to look back one day and no longer recognize who they've become. In a world that demands we adapt, that pressures us to blend in. That rewards those who smile even when they're exhausted. They take the harder path. To hold their values steady, they are willing to stand alone, if that means staying true. Willing to be misunderstood, if that means being honest. Willing to be out of sync, if that means staying in tune with their own soul. And if given the choice between being alone in truth or surrounded but lost, they'll choose solitude every time. Because that isn't isolation, it's courage. The quiet power of someone who knows who they are, and doesn't need the crowd to confirm it. And if you've chosen silence, that's a strength. If you've ever chosen silence over conflict, stepped away from the crowd to protect your peace, turned down attention to stay true to yourself, then you're not lost. You're on the right path. The path of those who understand noise is not power, validation is not the goal, and remaining true to yourself, that is the real victory. In today's world, many live to be seen, but the ones who live with depth are those brave enough to walk forward without being seen, without applause, without noise, just quietly and unshakably. If you saw yourself in the words we shared, welcome to the community of those who are calm on the outside but unbreakable within. Tap subscribe to receive weekly reflections that help you live deeper, stand firmer, and quietly build a mind the world cannot shake. Reflection question. When was the last time you chose silence to protect your truth? Share it below. Your story might be the gentle reminder someone else needs today.